taught the listening beyond yourself event, when you connect really deeply, what do you end up doing? You end up bumping into the places where things don't work. And that can either break connection or you have to know something about forgiveness. And so we figured that we would just teach people about forgiveness because we definitely don't want to have people break the connection, right? So that's why we ended up choosing this topic. Our dear friend Robert Cozen, as we said in the flyer, used to say that you need two things to be successful in your relationship, the ability to listen deeply and then the ability to forgive. And I think they happen really fast together. For those of you that don't know my marriage story, I'll give you the short version, and it's as fun because my husband's online listening. He's heard me tell this before, but it's usually different as well. We've been married for, I think it's 33 years. He thinks it's 33 years. It could be 34. I've lost track, which is a good thing because I'm not counting the number of days to get out of it, right?
Yeah.
But our first 5 years were not good. I call them the fateful first 5 years, or the first fateful 5 years. And that's because I didn't know the principles at that time. And I was very busy trying to protect myself, defend myself, get what I needed, trying to fix him. And none of that was working very well. And it got worse and worse and worse. I was studying Christianity at the time, and it was the Lenten season. And I was raised a Unitarian, which is, you could almost, if you go any further to non-Christian in the Christian faith, Unitarians at the end, and after that you fall off a cliff, right? I loved the Unitarians, but they didn't do much ritual and rites and that sort of thing. So I decided that I had noticed that I thought my husband was psychotic. That was the thought I had about him all the time. And I thought, okay, I'm a coach. I wasn't a Three Principles coach at the time, but I'm a coach working on helping people with their relationships, and I think my husband's psychotic. There's something sort of odd about that.
Yeah, just a little.
A little odd about that. And so that shows you how natural it is to have this insight strike you. And so I decided what I would do. I said to God, or whoever I was talking to at the time, I said, okay, I'm going to give up thinking my husband is psychotic for Lent. Because, giving up chocolate I'm not willing to do, and I'm already allergic to wine, so this sounds like a better deal. Hi, guys. There's a chair there and a chair there. You're welcome to. And there's a chair right there. So I did that, and I didn't tell him I was doing that. And the thing I noticed is I had that thought all day long, every day. Like every thought I had about my husband started with, yes, but he's psychotic. Well, I have to be compassionate because he's psychotic, or I can't really correct him because it was ridiculous. And so I gave it up, and the first week was terrible, and the second week got easier, and by the third week I realized that we were doing pretty well, and by the fourth week I realized that it was the best week we'd ever had in our marriage, or the best month we'd ever had in our marriage, which was annoying. Because guess what? Then I had that mean that it was my fault, not his fault. But for my thinking is what I thought. I would have had a great 5 years in this marriage. So then it took me another month to give up that there was something wrong with me. And then I finally told him what we were doing, and then I got really interested in why did that work. And so that's really why I've studied the principles for as long as I've studied the principles, is because it was so useful to my own marriage, and I didn't even know anything about the principles. So the fact that what Mark and I are going to talk about today is describing something that's innate. It's natural to us. Well-being is an innate part of being alive, and we're not taught that, which is sort of a shame. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And Mark and I have known each other for many years. Yeah. I haven't stopped to count how many, but many, many years. We bump into each other at all the Three Principles events, and we've had lunch together quarterly for a couple of years, and then we looked at each other and said, why don't we do something together?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I bet your husband was relieved when you stopped looking at him as psychotic.
Oh, I'm certain.
Oh, great, man.
I'm certain.
The starting point for this seminar that Julie had talked about, we did have a dear friend of ours who was really also involved with this understanding for many, many years, and he had he was providing this. He was just meeting with a group of us. He said, "Hey, you know what? You know what makes a relationship just easy to get along with?" And I said, "Well, what, Robert?" He said, "Well, listen and forgiveness." And I said, "What's that about?" He goes, "It's a daily dose of listening and forgiveness." And
I like that daily dose.
and it really is. And what we're going to speak to today is the forgiveness part of that, because if you get to see what that really means, what forgiveness really means, the understanding that you can find for yourself and another person for actions that were done in the past, and you have an understanding for that, and look at that with that understanding, you don't build resentments. Whatever has happened just kind of goes away. It doesn't haunt you like it would if you were continuing to keep score about how another person was at a certain point in their lives or things like that. That doesn't mean, and I'm going to emphasize this throughout the day, it doesn't mean that you have to like or ignore what went on. But with this understanding, you can begin to let it go and live with more connection. So last time we did the seminar on the listening part that brings the connection, and the forgiveness part deepens it. So we're going to speak to the misunderstanding at least I had, about what that meant to look at forgiveness and be forgiving, and see what you think about it. See if it see if it sounds helpful to you. There are a number of you here that know what we're talking about with these principles, and some of you that it may be new to. But I think that would be a wonderful foundation for us to align with, and speak from there about how do you look at your life through the lens of forgiveness. And again, this understanding for me is coming from my continual reading and listening to Sydney Banks, the person who brought this understanding into the world. And thinking about this seminar, I've been reading one of his books, The Enlightened Gardener, which is a wonderful book. And there's a section in there, just a couple of sentences. I said, this is a beautiful way to talk about the principles. And so I'm going to give that a try and see if it is a good way to talk about it. You let me know. So in The Enlightened Gardener, he shares this understanding in a story form. So there's a story of a group of psychologists that go to England for a conference, and they meet this gardener, this enlightened gardener, although they didn't know he was enlightened when they first met him. So there's all this dialogue between these psychologists and the gardener, and during those dialogues, various spiritual principles are talked about. They're having this conversation, and one of the psychologists says, well, Sid, what are emotions? What are feelings? And Sid said, emotions are created from thought and brought to our awareness through consciousness. So those are the first two principles. I'm going to just use the whiteboard and see here. So emotions, feelings, what we might call our experience of a moment. Oop. Is that right? Yeah. Oh, great.
You're missing an N in there.
I'm missing what?
An N.
And after the E. Experience.
Just erase it and do it again.
Oh, I got you. He says, are created through thought, which he calls a formless energy. Thought is a spiritual energy that we are a part of. Spiritual meaning that it's formless. You can't get your intellect around what does that mean. It just gives us the ability to create a reality, a moment of experience. So emotions are created by thought and brought to awareness through consciousness. So consciousness, another spiritual energy, allows life to be brought to whatever you create through this power you're given to think. So we're not really talking about the actual thinking you're doing. We're talking before that happens. That there really is something we are a part of that allows you to have thinking. The minute you're born, you have thinking. But we're not talking about that, which is really, I know I got to get this chair out of the way, and then I thought I had to put something else up here. So is that going okay? So you want to start looking at, there's an aspect of what we are in life that is really a spiritual aspect of us, a spiritual nature of us. And so we're talking about how the feelings we're having or the experience we have of I'm bothered, too much traffic, I'm just so happy, oh man, this is beautiful. All of that experience in the moment is being created from the fact that we're given this ability to create that. And consciousness allows us to really experience it. So if you just had a thought, you wouldn't know you wouldn't know that. You just had this thought. But consciousness brings us into an awareness of what we've created. So we get the totality of it, meaning we get the physiology of it, we get the chemistry effect of it, and we get our feelings and emotions. And of course, behavior follows all of that. So when he said that, I thought this is remarkable, because that's all you need to see. Really, that's all you need to see, that moment to moment for all of us, we're living in a thought-created reality. Whatever it is. For you, one moment you might be bothered, or your partner might be bothered. And both of you are doing the same thing. All living things are doing the same thing, using this gift of thought to create an experience in the moment. You don't even have to think about doing that. It's already what you do. And then because of consciousness, you have it. You experience it. It looks real to you. It looks truthful. That's why, if you ever have an opinion about somebody you're in a relationship with, that looks true, doesn't it?
Doesn't look like an opinion,
Julie's
does it?
example, pretty powerful example. Oh, my husband's psychotic. But when she thought that was brought to life by her, and she
I had
experienced
evidence.
it fully.
Oh, I had evidence.
Yeah.
I could prove it.
Yeah.
I had a whole story about it. Absolutely.
So this is something to see about our connection to all living things. All living things do this. Every human being does this. We're all the same this way.
I have a dog that does this. She is certain she's in charge of the other 3 dogs. So if anybody goes ahead of her, she thinks they're wrong, and she lets them know about it. You can watch it. I mean, it doesn't have to be a human being. Dogs do the exact same thing.
And that behavior by her dog, again, is because of the fact of thought.
Right.
That dog had thought. I mean, they're creating thought as long as they're alive. But anyhow, you want to, I don't want to get into too much about adding too much to this. You want to see the simplicity that the emotions you have, that we're going to help people transcend to forgiveness, are created through thought. And you feel the rightness of it, you get the total experience of it. So how could it be wrong, right, if I'm feeling all of this through consciousness? And you have this connection to this spiritual energy the minute you're born. This formless energy to live your life. Thought allows you to know your life, to know friendship, to know joy. again, we're not saying to do anything about the product of that. We're not saying that there's anything to judge about your thinking. We're just telling you why you have the experience you're having. So at this level, before we talk about the actual thinking you do, this doesn't have any opinion about how well your thinking's going or how well you're doing with this ability to think. It's just giving you that ability to create all of this for yourself in life and live in this life and know life. We're not saying anything you perceive through thought about yourself or another person is right or wrong.
This is more like a printer. You can print anything and it'll keep printing it out. You can print something that's nasty or you can print something that's lovely, but it's the mechanism that we're talking about, not the product of it.
And in this book, that's where these fictitious psychologists have a tough time, because in our popular, information about how we work psychologically, it's all about the thinking we're producing, and how to learn techniques to get better at that thinking. This is bringing you back to a truth of what you are, that all you need to do is have a little understanding that that's all that is giving you this experience, and it allows you to take another look at things. Now, the other aspect to the principles is the third principle. I'm moving the chair so that the video we're making of this has the whiteboard clear. So that's why I keep moving this
It's a new
chair.
exercise program.
Yeah. My daily exercise. How many reps? I've only had 2 reps so far,
The day is young.
The day is young, exactly.
And so what, let me see, I want to see how I bring this in. The third principle that we want to talk about is the principle of mind, which really is the pure spiritual energy in life, the pure intelligence that's behind the creation of life and this universe. And it's always being manifested, and then thought and consciousness takes this formless manifestation and brings it in through these living beings and makes it something. I think a way of looking at mind is to see is that you are a part of the intelligence that's behind this universe. The intelligence that's a part of all living things is within you. And the reason we're going to emphasize that is because as we speak about forgiveness, we want to begin to point to letting this intelligence we might call wisdom that we're all born with guide you, rather than what you've made up. Or, I don't mean it in a fake way, but what you've already created in your thinking about yourself or about other people in your life. So you have the wherewithal already, if you want to be guided by something that's greater than your belief system, that's greater than the ideas you've learned growing up, that's greater than whatever people innocently have given you through your life. Like when I grew up as a boy, a male in the 50s, it was like be tough, and through sports and all, it was always be tough. So I learned how my way was the right way and how to really stand for that, right? I mean, I wouldn't physically fight anybody about it, but I would debate everybody, including my wife, So, like Julie, she was really happy when I caught on to this understanding because, she said, now there's room for my ideas.
That's right.
Well, there always was. Didn't you hear me say, yes, dear, yes, dear? Well, by the time you said it, I was already, we already had debated a lot. Anyhow, I want to give you a feel for this intelligence. You see it in every living thing. if you still may not have a sense of it being what you are. For example, plants have an intelligence. They know, without you having to really work at it much, what minerals to take from the soil. And if there aren't those minerals, how to try to find it somewhere. Our bodies have an intelligence, if you might want to say that. Biology's talking about the intelligence of the cells of our body. And you know that too. You know, if you've had a cut or a wound, I am happy to know that there's an intelligence to the body to heal that. I take it for granted. But what we're really talking about is there's an intelligence to the body to go to work to get us back to health, right? Right? I mean, like if it was left up to me to do it, I'd never heal. I didn't even know what cells to start, how to get any cells to start going.
Who do we even call?
That's right, yeah. That's right, that's right. That's a great image, I love that. You get that? You get that? So the reason I point that out is because that's the same for this spiritual intelligence you're a part of. You can't, you yourself, through your level of understanding, can't bring it about, but it's there for you. And it's there to assist you. It's there with a wisdom to guide you to really take care of what's in front of you. And so that's what you are a part of. We're all connected to that. We're all connected to that energy right now as we sit here. And I know that I do a lot of calls over Zoom because I'm mentoring a lot of people in the principles. And here's the amazing thing. I could be talking to somebody in the UK over a machine, and we'd get a deep feeling of connection. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm talking about. That's all I'm talking about, is that feeling, which we are a part of 24/7 and are connected to every living thing by it. So you're alive, mind, you're alive. You've got the energy of life behind you, the intelligence of life to guide you. You think, and you experience what you're thinking. So that's the foundation.
One of the important things that Mark's pointing to is we're not saying that there's anything to control. That thinking is a lot like breathing, where there's just a thought that comes through the system. And we're used to certain thoughts, and so we focus on those sometimes more often than not. But this is really describing the way the machine works, the way the structure works, more than telling you to change anything. Because a lot of my clients will get themselves into trouble. The first question they say, but what do I do about this? In that experiment that I did, which came from wisdom, I'm certain, because I'd never had that thought before, it was fresh thinking. I didn't have to do anything other than not believe my own thinking. I had to just suspend my belief in my own thinking. And so if you need something to do, that's about all I'm going to tell you, that just suspend belief in your own thinking. You'll have a better life if you are cynical about your thinking rather than if you believe your thinking.
Does this make sense
Anybody,
at some level to
does anybody
people?
have questions about this? For how many of you is this brand new information? Let's ask that question. Nobody? Wow.
What was the question?
Is this brand for people in the room?
Who is this new for that has never heard an explanation of the... Oh, good. Hi.
Hi.
There's a chair over here if you want to get closer.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, I just came across this, a month ago.
Right.
When I met you, so
Right.
it's very brand new to me.
Good. So feel free to realize that those of us that have studied this for years don't understand it any more than you do. Okay? It's not an intellectual thing. This is more, comes from some place that's not intellectual.
I had a question. You had said, I wrote it down, that you start thinking at birth.
Oh,
And I never thought about it like that before, because there's not really an ego in place at birth. And so that's an interesting question that comes up for me. It's like, where does that start to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered if you could speak about that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, it's a great question. Again, we're not, so this is really good because, see, I would put the idea of an ego into the form. Into a form. You have to, as you develop, I forgot what the stages of early development are about, but you have to, you don't immediately start thinking about yourself when you're born. So ego, which I want to speak to that a bit, but if you could look at it as a sense of self-importance, that thinking wouldn't actually start when you're born, but the capacity to create starts. See, you're given this, because when you come in to the world, you're this spiritual being. And then you're given the capacities to live in your life. So the thought we're talking about is, again, not your thinking.
Right.
Yeah, it's great. It's like greater than that. And it's just, if you might want to look at it as a potential to give yourself an experience. So the minute you're born, you have an experience. It's coming through this capacity for thought, and it, it guides a newborn to its mother, right? So, or to comfort. But comfort isn't in the infant's mind, right? But it's being guided through thought and consciousness. You see, so you get these spiritual capacity. Oh, no, they're not spiritual capacity. You get the potential every moment to create an experience the minute you're born. And then you get through, I forget where it is, year 2 or so, you begin to really think about yourself. Oh, I think it's earlier than that, as a separate entity. Now, the other thing I'm going to just propose is there isn't an ego either. I mean, it's just an idea to talk about something we notice about how we use the power of thought. And Sid says, if you want to look at that, look at it as just a sense of self-importance. Thinking about yourself a lot. But that isn't for this particular seminar. But I want to. Did that help you see that?
It was perfect.
Oh, good.
Yay!
Oh, good. Okay.
It was a great question.
I have a tendency to go way beyond that.
There's another question over here.
When you said that we're born with thinking, with thought, I went to one of my beliefs, which is thought is words, because
Right.
thought kind of shows up as words for me. And I thought, okay, so you spend a couple of years before you put words together. So what's that about? So maybe thoughts aren't words. So I don't know if there's a question in here, but it kind of blew apart one of my beliefs.
Here's what's wonderful about that is it begins to point to there's something that it's so much greater than the language that we swim in intellectually. That is, when we touch that place, we have this experience of freedom, and there's this relaxing that occurs because our mind can settle, and our bodies can settle, and we're in that place. Oh, I know what it was I want to remember to say. This intelligence that Mark's referring to is always on our side. It's guiding us and to serve well-being. So when we're talking about intuition, it's not, you don't have to decide which way to go. Normally there's a choice that feels like it would be one that would give you well-being, and then there's all these other ones that you can't quite decide about, right? That's more like the difference that you're pointing to, which I love. I have not thought about that myself, which is language can get you in trouble, and this place that I think of down here more is on your side.
That's a wonderful thing that you just
It is.
got a sense of. And so my recommendation is just let it sit. Yeah, just let that sit in terms of what you just saw there. Because you touched a bit of the formlessness of this word that we're trying to use to describe this energy that you're given to see your life. So the way you talked about it, you just saw it. But the way to handle that is just let it percolate.
Right.
Let it percolate. I want to give you a little story just to kind of tie it together. You let me know if it ties it together. I'm hoping that it will. But it's a very powerful story because it just really struck the truth of this for me. Even though I've been studying this understanding for years and years, it always amazes me how much more I see all the time. I was a director of a program for a major medical center in the Bay Area. And I had, through the years that I was there, I had 4 different chiefs of the programs, overall program, that I had to report to. And there was this one that I just got scared of. The way that this person went about operating or handling things, I got really nervous around this person. And I had to go in weekly and report about my program and try also at times to get staffing. I think one thing that added to the nervousness was if my program had bad statistics for the week, I would get them in my mailbox with a red underlined with red with exclamation points. So that added to getting a little nervous, You can't blame me, right? See, that's what we're going to get to. We're not saying, I should ignore that or to say, well, I'm supposed to like that. That's how you forgive. You like that. Well, I don't like that, You could speak to me in a better way, right? Okay, so every time I would go in to report, I'm already anxious before I get in there. I sit down and I can't get out of getting anxious. And I start, sweating a little bit because of the anxiety as I'm talking. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm sweating. I better not sweat, What if this? So it's like, no win. Okay. No win. Now, this is all created from my ability to think. I filled in this formless energy with these thoughts. And that's consciousness bringing the sweating, bringing the feeling I was getting of, and the worry. That's how it played out. Now here's how the wisdom piece plays out. I'm sitting in a staff meeting one day, and she's talking in the way that always would get me to become judgmental toward her. And I all of a sudden realized what we're going to be talking to you. It just came to me. What I'd been understanding about the principles just occurred. See, this is what's different about it being a strategy. I didn't think, I've got to think positively here, right, not negatively. Oh. It just occurred to me, a piece of wisdom of something I'd heard through the seminars I was attending and the readings I was doing about this understanding. And here's what occurred to me. She's just insecure. She's just caught up in her own insecure thinking. Or she's stressed out. That's why she's acting the way she is. She's in a troubled state of mind. And I saw that rang true for me because that's the truth about everybody. I saw that, and then I was free of the judgment, and my heart actually went out to her. I had compassion in a nanosecond. And so I'm sitting there and thinking, holy cow, this is amazing, wow, this is a totally different person. But it continued. Again, the beautiful essence of what we are connected to, what we are a part of. We're walking back, all of us are walking back to the main part of the clinic after the meeting, and more wisdom, I would call it wisdom, but new thoughts were coming to me from that intelligence. It was like I saw a way that I might have provoked her reaction to me, because I at times would demand something from my program rather than communicate it in a more understanding way. So I kind of saw how I might have played into it. And then I saw, well, I should go and tell her that I'm sorry about being that way and that I really want to work with her. That came to me. See, that came to me. And I followed that. I went right into the office and said that to her. And, you know, with that person, it worked out fine, because she said when she, I guess, had a really sense of where I was coming from, which was a deeper feeling than I had with her before, she said, I want to do the same thing with you. And we had just a wonderful relationship for the rest of the time. Really grateful for that. But the piece I wanted to share with you is the two things: I want to say this right. How the way I was using this beautiful gift of thought was creating in me a way of looking at this boss that created fear, or created, you know, annoyance or irritability. And how, how something that occurred to me out of an understanding changed the way I looked at things through thought. And that guided me, because I didn't have those thoughts beforehand at all about how to work things out with her. In fact, I didn't even notice my role in maybe how things could have worked out the way they were. So that's just the story of of these principles.
But that's forgiveness, because suddenly you're no longer judging and assessing. And when compassion shows up in that nanosecond, guess what happens sort of automatically is you have room for people to be human and flop around. So you have room for insecurity and you have room for anxiety. That doesn't mean you put up with things you shouldn't be putting up with, but there's so much about being human that's difficult. How many of you have figured out at this, in my case, advanced stage of life, that being human is not for the faint of heart? Well, when we try and be related to the perfect person or be the perfect person ourselves, it's horrible. It's a horrible way to live. And yet when we have that moment where we're guided to suddenly have this insight, the way I experience it in my body is I can breathe again. And then everybody looks just really human, and I have a lot of room for that because I'm connected to them again. That's the heart of listening in that way that's given by wisdom, is that you just get connected with someone, and it kind of doesn't matter what's happening at that point because the connection sorts it all out.
Does this make sense to people? Anything you want to share from what we've presented to you so far?
Question. I'm trying to get the so there's an action has occurred that has, say, brought about loss. There's the person that was responsible for that action, and I can forgive that, but the sadness of the loss is still there.
Oh, for sure.
I want that to go away. No, I don't want that to. I don't want that to go away. I don't want to be the kind of person that doesn't feel, doesn't experience sadness at loss. But it does get confusing. I do get it confused when the loss comes up and I feel the sadness and then the anger comes back.
Well, yeah, and we're saying, so this is really good. It helps with getting a deeper sense of kind of the neutrality of what you're a part of that's within you that creates those experiences of sadness and anger and the possibility for forgiveness. And what it is that all you want to know is where those feelings, why you can have those feelings. And you can have those feelings because you're alive and you have thought and consciousness to think whatever you want to think. So whether you forgive or not has nothing to do with whether it's okay to have sadness or anger or whatever. That's just what you're thinking. And you have thought to do that. So it isn't about you should have less of this or more of that. As your understanding for the way people are, how we work together, how we're all connected together using thought, and how our actions are a result of the thinking we're in, that guides you to respond to your feelings and thinking in a way that might be different for you. But if you move to this understanding and you find forgiveness, you may still feel sadness for what happened. I know with the people in my life that I've lost, when I have a memory of them, I feel the loss. I also have memories of the great times we had together. You see? Mm-hmm. All of that's coming to me through thought. Memories, thought. And but the key to your question is understanding the principles does not critique the feelings you have. It's not saying, okay, you should finally no longer feel sad. Okay, it's about time now, all right? How many times you have to read this book? It's not saying that. We say that. All through the years of my going through the evolution of understanding the principles and being involved with so many people understanding the principles, that's a little bit of the misunderstanding of them that we all fall into. In the early days when we first caught on to this, we became so aware of our thinking, we kind of said, oh my God, what's wrong with us? I have so much negative thinking. I am so into so many negative thoughts. What's wrong with me? Well, it has nothing, see, understanding that you create has nothing to do with whether you should have that experience or not. You'll know whether you should have it or not, depending upon the understanding you have for how you create that experience. That's really the key. So if you shift on some element, like you're able to forgive somebody's actions, I think that's a beautiful thing. And you should live in the gratefulness of finding that. And if you still have other emotions and you like to get a little less of that, just keep at this understanding. But don't confuse the understanding of what's behind that, what's giving you the power to have that experience, with whether it's right or wrong to have it. You're having it just because you're having it. And then if you want to have it more, it's just about, okay, I just want to see more, help me see more. And you just stay reflective. Just stay open to, oh, I want to be less angry about this. Let me see if let me just keep seeing if there's more in here somewhere that'll guide me. Does that help?
It does help.
Yeah. Can I stay with you for a second?
Sure.
You need to speak into the microphone.
Sure.
That's wonderful. What a great feeling, huh? Can you just share what point made sense?
It was actually as we got, I guess you and this, you said kind of the same thing like 3 or 4 times when it finally got into me the 4th time, which is that there's what's behind this, the mechanism, the technical, whatever's going on back there, is not necessarily, that's not telling me it's not a judgment on what I'm currently doing with that.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing. And then what came to me, the last thing that came to me was when I feel angry, I immediate about the I feel sad about the loss. And actually, I guess there's anger about the loss, that I immediately want to go blame the person that, I also want to forgive. So, and so maybe I could ask where else that anger might take me other than blame, other than retracting forgiveness. Is there some other place that anger might take me? Does that make sense?
Okay. Well, I love the point you got. I think that, again, as you have those today, I just want you to stay with that first point you have, that these principles have no say about whatever you're creating. What you want to do with the anger is not look that it's going to give you more information. I think you want to begin to look at how that's just a result for the way you're thinking. The anger is just a way you're using thought. That's all you want to see about it. You don't want to give it too much life to think that it's going to guide you to a better place. Usually in my role, in terms of anger with me, it never guided me to a better place.
Never.
Yeah, I had, in fact, probably the worst places, So what you want to do with the feelings like that, with today's sharing with you, is begin to look within the fact that that's being created through thought. That's all you want to do with that feeling. The way you're using your thinking about that person is creating anger. And you can't have forgiveness if you're in anger. Right. No way it works, right?
This is really important. Because if you try and forgive over the top of anger, you're still disconnected. You're still not in a feeling state that is going to allow for you to see anything new. Anger keeps reinforcing whatever it is you're seeing. Now, then I can hear the little mind going, okay, so then how do I get rid of the anger, right? And it's not a how-to. The how-to is always the wrong question. Darn it. But the how-to is always the wrong question. And it's more like if you trust that thinking is impermanent, always. It just keeps moving through you. That if you just allow for that fact, it will, 10 minutes from now, if you go for a walk or just doing something different, you'll have different thinking and you'll experience something different. So you don't want to try and change anything. And the more you investigate anger, the more you're inviting it to stay around. And so you're kind of bypassing the mechanism which could save our lives. And does repeatedly save our lives. Anything more about that, Catherine?
3 people here, so let's...
Just gotta sit with it.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Perfect.
Lou, and then... did you want... Lou, and then in front of you, and then to the side. There. Okay.
Thanks.
Hi.
So my question is, why do you think it can look more challenging to forgive yourself than it is to forgive others? Because I think what we've talked about so far, I find much easier to relate to. But when it comes to reacting to my feeling experience of myself, it feels very different.
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Shall we tackle that question?
Well, here's what came up for me to say is it's all the same mechanism, and we intellectually put weight on it when it's us. But it's all the same mechanism. So the amount of separation we have between us and another is probably a little bit larger than we have between us and us. So we have these innocently impossible standards that we were raised with. And we're so early in our childhood that we think that of course we should have those, because that's the thinking structure that we're inside of. But when you start to, let me just tell a story. This is going to be better than trying to work my way through it the way I was going. My husband and I are very, very different people. So I'm much more interested in things in a proper space and order, and I alphabetize my spices. It gets that bad, right? And my husband is much more freeform, and the way he remembers things is to have them out so he can see them. And you can imagine this added to the first fateful 5 years, right? And we, at least I, we'll have to interview him at another point, but I spent a lot of time trying to decide if I was right about that, or if I was too, what's the word that you would call that if you were too organized? Rigid. OCD, that's exactly what I was trying to think of, AJ, is OCD. So I was harsh with myself about that, like maybe I should just be more freeform. And when I started really developing this understanding about the principles, I noticed I just had room to be curious a lot more, that it wasn't like a comparison thing. Someone said to me years ago, and I don't remember who it is, I wish I could because I'd give them a gold star or something. They said to me that anytime you compare any two things, and you to anything, regardless of whether you win or lose in the comparison, mood drops. And I've watched that for a long time. And so I think a lot of how hard I am on myself was a comparison thing. Like I should be better than I am, or I shouldn't have done, or I should have done, or how could I have? It's all comparison. And so when I noticed that was one of those things that I thought, well, what if I just didn't compare and got curious about why does he do it that way? And why do I do it this way? And the big question is, why is that a problem? And sometimes, I mean, we did have to come up with a structure, because at the time I was doing a lot of my consulting work in my living room. And so we came up with this plan where the living room would be more organized, so it had more of a hospitality feel. And then I would not care about his office, and his side of the bedroom could be one way and my side. We just worked it out from wisdom, right? But that's when we'd given up that one of us was wrong. So I don't know if that helps, but there's something about the comparison and the fact that we can look out there and see we have a lot of room for other people to make mistakes, but we don't so much with ourselves. I'm not sure I'm answering the question. If you have something to say.
No, you did. Well,
she still looks puzzled.
Well, I'm going to go to the whiteboard again, because the last time we did this seminar, I drew one thing on the board,
right. And it was great.
Said, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. And
changed her whole life.
It wasn't much.
Right.
But then Julie reminded me that some people like to see things,
right.
you know? And so I thought, whenever I get a thought in my head to go to the whiteboard, I'm gone.
Yeah, exactly.
So forgive me if... I'm kidding with you all. No, part of that I was kidding.
Right, but not all of it. Yeah.
Okay, this is how I was helped by Sydney Banks to add to what you're saying. Forgiveness equals understanding. Love is in there too, as Julie was talking about the feeling that comes from that. Now, what is the understanding? So I said, okay, Sid, what's the understanding? Right. You know? Come on. And here's what it is. This is what we're going to move into with you around forgiveness. All of us are doing all we can with the thinking that's forming in our minds at this moment. Not even are we doing the best we can. We're doing all we can. We cannot do anything more than what is forming in our thinking. So, So if you got like exhausted, if you were having a low mood day, if you were self-conscious, those are all thoughts. And if you're in that thinking, you're going to operate from there. So you might be a little more inconsiderate with those thoughts to another person. And had you been thinking more about what a wonderful day, geez, what a beautiful place the Bay Area is as you're driving in, oh, what wonderful people are here, or you're relaxed, you're going to operate from that thinking. That's it. That's the understanding. That's the understanding. And everybody works that way. There are some people in our world that are living in a very, very fearful, terror world. And they're going to do acts from there. And most likely they're going to be against people, right? You're not going to like what you get from people like that. Now, with what Julie's talking about there, is we look at getting perfect, those beliefs we grew up in, the expectations about ourselves, or a way to be treated by another person, or how well we should do something. All those are just thoughts that we learned, that affect the way we're going to feel about ourselves and affect the way we go about our lives. And if we act less than those expectations, as Julie was sharing, you might get judgmental about yourself, or you might get judgmental about the other person, right? So as Julie's husband wouldn't organize things, because of his learned thinking, he's doing all he can with the thinking he's doing, the thinking he has in his mind, right? He can't do any better because that's all he's thinking. He can't be different. Now, he can the next moment, but right now, that's not what he's thinking. So Julie can look at that and look at the result of thinking and have her own thinking about the behavior. But if she has understanding of where it's coming from, she'll move away from being judgmental. Now, the same with ourselves.
Right.
Same with ourselves. As Julie's saying, I think the reason it's more difficult with ourselves is because a lot of our beliefs of how we should be don't look like thoughts as much as it does with the other person. No, that's really how I should be.
Right.
Can you repeat that? I didn't quite follow.
Let me see if I could get it, okay? The reason it looks more difficult for us to be more understanding for another person than toward ourselves is because the thoughts we have about how we should be don't look like thoughts. They look like truths. Yeah, this isn't a thought, that I should have been able to do the 40th thing on my list today. That's a joke. I mean, unless, I don't know, maybe you have
Nobody
40
laughed.
things.
Oh my God.
I think that's the thing, that's the piece there. So that's the understanding piece you want to begin to reflect to. That you are just up against learned thoughts you picked up in life about how you should be in your life. and what you should do here and what you should be able to do there. And that's what's really why that not looking like learned thinking is why it's harder for you to forgive yourself and easier to forgive somebody else, because you could say, oh yeah, man, they're having a stressful day. But you don't give yourself that room because of your expectations. You should say, oh, heck with stress. I should be able to do this even though I'm stressed. We do things like that with our learned thinking, I believe. That's just my idea of it, but I think that's what makes it more difficult. What helps is the understanding that we're doing all we can do every moment with the thinking that's in our minds right now. Now, the next moment, our thinking will change and we'll be different. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yes. And the thing that's like occurring to me is, I think I always learned that feeling was a form of feedback, that with me, I needed to acknowledge and like do something with it. It was telling me that something could and should be different, as opposed to just noticing it.
There's what?
Just noticing it.
Just noticing.
Yeah.
But I think when we have the privilege to have an understanding that wellness and joy is always available to us, in my experience, it can feel more challenging when that's not the experience I'm having, because I'm like, God damn it, I know this is BS and I've just made this up, but why am I not having the experience that I know is there?
I just want to say something. It's such a profound thing you just said. I'm like compelled to say something about it, which is, Mark said something in July that stuck with me this entire time, which is, if we just consider that whatever we're experiencing has something to do with our thinking, we're way ahead of the game. We don't have to do anything other than just consider that our experience has something to do with our thinking. And that notion alone gives you enough separation that new thinking has a chance to get through. So that's number one. Number two is, I've heard Linda Pransky say, why do I think I should have such a charmed life and not be human? Right? And she's right about that. Like, we're designed to have moods and to have, it's part of the deal. Right? And so when we start to have some forgiveness for ourselves about being human, you start to enjoy the fact that you're human. So my husband and I have this wonderful game that we do now where when one of us is in a mood and suddenly notices it, we announce to the other one, I'm in a really bad mood and it has nothing to do with you. Even if I think it might. I take him off the hook, right? And he does the same thing with me, because we're just aware that humans go through moods, and there's nothing to be done with figuring anything out when we're in a mood. We should just stay away from each other. And then we come back 5 minutes later and we're fine because we've announced we're in a bad mood, which then brings us awareness of the mood, and the mood moves on. So I love what Linda said about, why do I think I should be happy all the time? Like, am I the queen bee or whatever, right? So this, just giving ourselves room to be human is a lot of this.
Oh, yeah. That brings up a story. I love that. Again, in this medical center, there was a year when it was pressured to do a lot of patient contact, and so we had to see a lot of people. And it got to a point where everybody was getting stressed out and all, and a colleague of mine just said, and I was kind of saying, oh man, I don't know. I was like getting on myself for not being, for being so stressed out about this. Hey, I was called to do this. I love being of service to people. How come I'm feeling, like another one?
Right.
And, oh, I shouldn't say another person, But, and she said, We're just being asked to do what's beyond humanly possible. And this understanding speaks to that. Deeper, to see that our thinking, the learned thinking we've grown up in about how we should be, asks us at times to go beyond what's humanly possible. That's what I love about what you're saying.
Yes.
You see. And all you have to do really is take a look at that. It's not doing anything, but just take a look at that. Wow, feeling bad about myself. What's this all about? What am I up against in terms of what's this thinking that I'm supposed to be able to handle this way? One other piece. Can I share one other piece? I want us to take a break soon.
Right.
I'm just going to add one other piece here that fits, and then we'll come back to it through the day. There's another aspect to this, and it kind of speaks to why do you even know that you should be judgmental about yourself? Okay, why do you
Such a
even
great
know
question.
that? Well, how would you know that? Okay, so here you are. Let's say you're at this level of thinking. Okay, and it led you to act this way. And you're going about that level. But then your thinking jumps up at a little more level of understanding. So it jumps up to here, and you get a thought, oh my God, I didn't do that, and I promised somebody I would do that. So you're up here and you're looking down here. But what you're forgetting is you were down here when you did that. But you're looking at yourself from having a broader perspective. And you're holding yourself accountable for being somewhere you weren't. You get it? You get that? You see how funny that is? I mean, it's, how funny we are. Because we all do this. And this is the key to see about it. Is that, now, the information you get up here, it may tell you something about here, but if you don't hold it as if in a judgmental way, you take care of something that you did down here in the way that you should. So, for example, an apology is this. An apology is kind of being all stressed out and talking harshly to your spouse. Then your mind settles down and you get your bearings back. You say, oh my God, man, I didn't really want to do that. Instead of saying, oh, what a rotten guy I am, when am I going to stop, that kind of behavior? If you understand yourself this way, it just occurs to you, why don't you just go say you're sorry?
Right.
You see, it'll occur to you, it'll be very easy to do that. It'll be very easy to do that with yourself too. So do you get this piece? This is the other piece to it. And once you kind of see that, oh my God, every time I feel bad about myself, what's happened is I am looking at myself from a higher vantage point with more knowledge. Again, I got my knowledge back, but I'm using it against myself. Right? That doesn't make sense. So if you can see that, you become more accepting of the fact that you're just going to do all you can do given where your thinking's at. Now you wish you could do better, so maybe you'll look at that and say, oh man, I want to get better at that. That's good. But we're talking about getting the forgiveness in line and the judgments away from it. And knowing this helps you become more accepting of your humanness. And this is the only way you get caught up. Is until then you're fine with the way you acted. You really are.
And we all know people like that.
You are, right? Because that's all you think. That's all you can see. It's only until you get to a little, maybe a little more expansive view of things that you can see, there I go again,
And that's the miracle, that you see, oh, I don't want to act like that anymore. That's the indication that your thinking has shifted to a higher level of understanding. But we're not grateful for that.
No, we use it against
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's all I just wanted to add that piece to it. George, did you have something you want to say?
I think you said it already. To me, what that looks to me is the essence of self-forgiveness.
Yes.
Right in there. That the only reason we hold the blame is when our thinking changes and goes up, we don't think it's something besides our thinking changing. We think there's something wrong with us.
That's right.
There's a flaw.
That's right.
Or there's something else going on.
Right.
We have that misunderstanding.
That's a beautiful piece too, George. That we do think about having something going on other than the thinking changed. You see how simple that is? You see how it moves you away? That's really nice. I'm glad you added that piece.
Yeah, it's lovely.
You see how that takes you away from having something psychologically wrong with you? I mean, isn't that wonderful? To know, oh, really, I'm not, I don't know how.
Our nature is well-being, period. There isn't anybody whose nature isn't well-being. And then there's thinking. And that's the mischief, is the thinking. But if we think there's something wrong with us, we're denying the fact that our nature is well-being. There's nothing wrong with anybody. It's just thinking.
Yeah. One more thing. That, again, I know I keep saying one more thing, right? 4 things ago I said one more thing. Again, as Julie and I have been saying, from there with understanding, you can say, I want to get better than that. All right? Again, it doesn't mean when you forgive or self, I forgot your word, George,
Forgiveness?
yes,
Self-forgiveness, yeah.
self-forgiveness. That doesn't mean you like it or ignore it. See, you don't repress it.
Right.
When you can see it with understanding, you just kind of look at it softly and say, you know, that I don't want to keep acting that way. That's different than giving yourself a bad time for being there again, or as George saying, thinking there's something wrong with you that you showed up like that again. It's just a change in the quality of your thinking. That's all that happened.
I was thinking maybe it was a little late to come back to this, but actually I think it ties in. What occurred to me when you were talking about the flow of thought, you know,
Yes.
that it's all impermanent, it's all temporary.
Yes.
And after you had spoken, thank you, that was beautiful what you were saying. It just occurred to me to say that the forgiveness still exists, even if anger comes after it. Because in that moment of
I like
forgiving
that.
thoughts, I'm experiencing forgiveness. A few months ago, I went through something really painful, and I had this profound experience of forgiveness one day, and it was so great. And I was able to say, like, I totally forgive. Like, I'm sending love, you know. And then I still had like really angry thoughts afterwards. You know, like I almost wanted to take it back, like, but that was wrong, you know, like. And I would have angry thoughts, and I would grieve, and I would have grief thoughts, and each period brought that feeling. But it doesn't mean the forgiveness experience didn't exist. It doesn't mean that it's not always there as
That's
soon as
lovely.
my thoughts return to it.
It's lovely.